I got a message just last week from someone saying, I've always called myself an atheist, but I'm now the closest I've ever been to believing in God, and that's thanks to what you guys do. So and I'm like, I've never even met this person before. I've never been in the same room. So if you go, but you have to meet over a coffee and you have to have a Bible out in front of you, it's just like, according to this case study, I don't know if that's the case.
Welcome to the Kings and Priests podcast.
Hey, and welcome to the Kings and Priests podcast, where we are super passionate about amplifying the influence of young professionals for the church and for the world. I really hope that this conversation helps you feel like you can take your next step towards becoming and being the change that's needed wherever you are. So without taking up any more of your time, let's get stuck into this episode's conversation.
Kiran, bro, it's so good to see you, man. Thanks for jumping on this podcast. It's been years.
It has been. It's been a long time, but keen to be here, keen to reconnect in this way as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just keen to hear about everything you're doing on the online space.
Yeah.
So to give our listeners and our viewers just a quick overview of who you are, what you do. So previously you were an associate pastor in a church, kind of looking after the youth, the younger generation. And you were doing that for a few years, if I'm not correct.
8 years.
8 years. We met at a youth event. More than 8 years ago, probably. And now you've had a really big life shift, which I'd love you to open up about. But for our viewers and listeners who may be watching this on YouTube and who may not know what Twitch is, what is Twitch?
Okay, so if you're watching this on YouTube right now, essentially what you need to know, YouTube, we understand that concept. Twitch is like that, but instead of it being a video that is pre-recorded, it's all live content. So the only things on Twitch is live content. It's actually the number one live streaming platform in the world, predominantly focused around gamers. So it was originally built around people that play video games and that kind of thing. Since then, they've kind of expanded out. It's owned by Amazon. So for context in terms of the companies behind it, so that's Twitch.
Yeah, and I've got some stats here. 20,000 followers. That's what you've got on Twitch. And it's essentially like you said, a website for live streaming. So that's what you do. So we've kind of jumped the gun a little bit and exposed what you've done without you telling us. But I mean, this stat, Twitch nearly doubled its daily users in 2020 from 17 million to 30 million. 30 million people watching live streamers daily. What a huge area of need, I guess. So for those listening and for myself, tell us about your journey. So as a pastor who's kind of doing in-person stuff, risk assessments for youth events, right? Because we know that you're either, handling raw food, or, someone's going to get hurt, and you shifted to being really an online evangelist, pastor, whatever you want to call it, via a game streaming website. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the journey, wasn't an overnight click. It was a gradual weaning in and clarifying of what God was calling me to. So I knew that I was called to care for the next generation and to do that. And so I was doing that as youth pastor, eventually became associate pastor, was looking after things, like you said, did that for 8 years. And by about the 6th year of that journey is when I started noticing this shift in youth culture. The population in our area was increasing dramatically, and yet the number of people in the spots that we are used to meeting them wasn't increasing by the same rate. And I was like, something's not adding up here. So we had an active skate park ministry, a basketball ministry, all these different things. But I was like, why aren't there more people in those spaces? And eventually it wasn't hard to realize that more and more young people were spending their time on their devices. They were on their phones, their PlayStations, their whatever. And this became a bit of a social norm where a lot of people would now hang out, but the way they would do that was via a Discord call or via, jumping on PlayStation, putting their headset on and talking to each other that way. And so in that process, I thought, well, if that's where the people are, then that's where we would need to be. So I basically did a bit of research. I love Googling things. I love looking things up. And I realized the stats around how many gamers there are. You mentioned how many are on Twitch. That is a small percentage. Because get this, the number right now, so as of 2021, late 2021, the number of active gamers worldwide is now 3.24 billion people.
3.24 billion.
Billion with a B.
With a B.
And the world's population is about 7.9 billion people. So just
under half of the world is on...
Of the world. And that includes, mobile gamers like PlayStation, console, PC, whatever.
Sure.
But the active gamers worldwide is that. That shocked me. But then also I was like, I get it, because I started asking people and everything, and it's just like, this is what I do in my free time sometimes and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I then stepped back and went, as a pastor, as a youth pastor, I'm looking at this going, there's that huge people group, evidently one of the largest people groups there is, that spans across all age groups and all demographics and all countries. And I'm like, how many churches do I know that are trying to meet that people group?
Sure.
And I couldn't think of any.
Sure.
And therefore I was like, okay, I wonder what happens if today when I go home after church and I, turn on the PlayStation, which was my natural mode of switching off.
Switching on to switch off.
Totally. So I was like, today when I do that, why don't I just hit the go live button on this website called Twitch and see what happens? And if I do have anyone happen to show up, then I'll see if I can share my faith with them, and I'll see if I can bring the gospel into that conversation. It might work, it might not work. Let's just give it a go.
Wow. So I just want to dig in really quickly there, because you said something, you said, you were seeing a trend where the church potentially, and when we say church, we often think of the four walls where, a pastor is kind of leading a service and there's a worship team, and it's almost very structured. You get through it in an hour and then you can connect afterwards. But you were seeing a trend where people were still gathering. It just wasn't happening here, which is very reflective of the trend in church attendance in Australia and the world, which is on the decline, right? And I love that you said, so instead of trying to get people back into church, you're like, well, I just would meet them. I'm like, why aren't people meeting them where they are? And that's what Jesus did. Jesus met people where they were. He never had to invite someone to the synagogue. He sat with the woman at the well. He went to the disciples as they were fishing. And I love that it's been a focus for you. And I think that's why it's so powerful, and especially for our listeners and viewers, because we are now talking about, okay, well, if Sundays are potentially for us as Christians, how do we meet people where they are in our workplace, in our university, whatever we do online in your case? And I love that you were saying, there's, you just jumped on, you just did it because it was a part of your life to play games, and you were like, well, I wonder what this is going to look like. How did that start? Because I think that's the hardest part to start. It's always the first step that's the hardest step for a lot of people. And it's always the fear of failure. Where it's like, okay, if I go live, and that's a hard thing in itself, like being vulnerable where everyone can see what you're doing, probably stemming from like social media culture where you can put something up and get, negative comments on it, cancel culture. Everything's like, when you put yourself up there and out there, you're very vulnerable to everyone else's criticism. How did you feel when you started going live for the very first time?
So for me, it was a simple sense of obedience to that calling. You know what I mean? Because I knew that God wants me to reach young people with the gospel. I knew that was clear in my mind. And therefore, I had identified that where can I do that most effectively? Yes, in my local church context, I've been doing that for almost a decade and I've been loving it. And don't get me wrong, like I don't regret those years. It was amazing. And I'm glad that youth group is still running to this day. But here, I had this opportunity of reaching even more people than we physically could otherwise. And that was the sense of, I need to just do this. And even if it means that I reach one or two people, then that's one or two people that might not have been reached otherwise. So for me, it wasn't this, I want to blow up, I want to be some massive streamer, I want to, none of that. In fact, since then, I've even set up a variety of things to stop that from happening in a way, which we might look into later. But what I mean by that is in the sense of accountability systems and things like that. So I've set this up in a way that I will never get rich off this stream. Even if as a YouTuber things blow up and they become millionaires, that will never happen for me, even if we blow up because of the way we've set it up. And that's intentional. But that just comes down to going, you know what? I just need to do it. One thing that I often say when I preach in churches is one step forward is still forward. Because people often go, oh, but I need to get all the way to this thing. And for me, it wasn't, all right, this year we need 100 people watching the stream or anything. It was just, today I will stream and there might be 0 people. And there was, for like weeks on end, there was 0 people. I didn't tweet about it. I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't tell church friends. It wasn't some church campaign. Like it was just me sitting on my bed with my PlayStation and one dodgy laptop that was stacked on a pile of books so that the camera was at a better angle. Yeah. That was the setup, right? That was it.
The grind,
Exactly.
Started from the bottom.
Exactly, literally. And it was 0 people for ages. And I didn't let that discourage me because my logic was, it's my downtime anyway. I was going to do this anyway. So I'll just, And then eventually when it clicked from 0 to 1, that's when everything started changing.
Yeah, I love that because a lot of people would see your 20,000 followers on Twitch and the thousands of views you get and probably want what you have now, but not what you had then.
Yeah.
And I think, this ties in so well with the probably the physiology side of things when it comes to screens, and our instant gratification culture where it's just like, we have everything at the click of a button now.
Yep.
We can swipe left. We can, order food that's going to be here in, depending on where you live, like 5 minutes or, 2 hours.
Yeah.
But everything is working to our ease at the moment. So we often bypass the journey to get to the destination.
Yep.
So for someone who is listening to this as a pastor or a business owner who may be in that place of, no online engagement, they've got their social media guy who's posting daily. They've got, say, a church leader who's streaming their services for only 10 people.
Yeah.
In that hard spot where you were, what's some encouragement that may help them get through these weeks, months, years, where they just may really pick up and start running with it? Because I feel like that's something that you've gone through. Like you said, you did the hard yards and now where you are is not a reflection of you just blowing up out of nowhere. It's years of work.
Yeah. Honestly, one of the things that I would say, again, this is something that I go and preach about in places, is another one of the points that I like to bring up is don't quit, but adapt. And what I mean by that is sometimes doing the same thing over and over again actually isn't the right play. Sometimes it is, but it can often be, mistaken for, it's the grind, just keep going. But it's like you might actually not be using your efforts in the right way because that just isn't the thing.
And can I just jump on
absolutely.
in on that? Because the grind is such a glorified culture in our world. And I actually think that we may have it wrong.
Yeah.
Either that or Christians are chasing something that has been very glorified in the secular space, like the grind. And every time I hear the grind, I keep thinking about, that passage, which is like, do not conform to the patterns of this world. And that just tells me that, it just shows me that something like the grind, which is a pattern of 9 to 5, in many cases, it's, 7 to 7 for corporate workers. And it's been accepted as I need to do this to be someone or to be successful. And it's a measure of success, which I'm like, maybe as a Christian, it's not. Sorry to cut you off. But I love that you said the grind because it's just, I think we're trying to, how do we redefine this as Christians? So we can work well and we can work with excellence, but we don't have to work to the world's standards.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean when I say don't quit, adapt, is that if what you're doing is for the right reason, if the calling is the same. So for example, for myself, the ministry that I'm in, the calling is to reach gamers with the gospel, right? I can do that because I speak their language, I understand the context, I've looked into it, and this is the heart that I have for this people group. But if the means of reaching them, which currently is Twitch, is our main platform. We're on all the platforms, but that's our main space. If the means isn't working, that doesn't mean that the people group don't need it.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Either way, that people group need to be reached. So if I'm grinding on Twitch every day, to use that term again, and people are like, it's just never working forever, maybe I do need to adapt that. Maybe Twitch isn't the mode, but maybe instead I need to look at, what would it look like if we were to do YouTube and that kind of thing. But I think the key piece of it, there's no cut and paste formula, you know what I mean? There's no, you just need to keep going, and there's also no, you just need to pivot, but instead it's a sense of being intentional and having your finger on the pulse, you know what I mean? And praying about that and talking to people and sitting with it and really seeking God and doing that.
Because Jesus didn't come with a blanket statement. He, like we were saying before, he met fishermen, spoke to them in parables of fishing. And he met the tax collectors and spoke to them about money. Like he knew how to connect with that, with that demographic he came for, which you've done so well because you've seen the need and you're like, okay, well, if this is not working, say in a youth, church aspect, then how do I then meet them where they are?
Totally. When I started doing a skate park ministry, I was not a skater, right? Didn't know anything about it. But you know what I did? I sat there at the skate park, and I spoke to the local people there, and I started to learn, and I understood. And eventually I was able to be like, yep, that's a flare whip, and that's this and that's that. And I knew all this stuff, to the point where when the next skate comp came around, I was the one emceeing it and was able to call out random things because I knew the lingo and I knew the world. Was I a skater even in that point? Absolutely not. But was I intentional? Yes, I was. And same way here, that going into this, even our team members, when people volunteer in this ministry, I go, there's going to be a lot to learn. But it's worth it, because if you want to do it well, then you need to have your finger on the pulse, be willing to learn, be willing to adapt and figure out, not just copy paste what you used to do. There are elements of what I did at Parkside Youth that I've now brought into this, but there's also a lot that has been curated and created in this space for this space that I wouldn't know unless I was in this space. And that takes time, and it takes, organically figuring these things out. The stream 3.5 years ago looked very different and functioned very differently to how it does today. And that's a good thing, because it's been this slow process of all in God's timing, trusting his process and going, we weren't ready for this thing back then. So if God gave it to us then, we would have struggled. Like if we had 20,000 followers on day one, it would have crashed and burned, I'm telling you right now. And I would have burnt out. But instead, it was this, as we were able, then it was given to us. And it was this mode of going, here we are. And it's awesome.
That. Yeah, because I love that you said as you were able, because it comes back to a parable. Jesus talks about the talents and being stewarded, and I love that sometimes we miss it, but he says the master gave to each person's ability how much they deserved. Often we want the 3 talents or the 5 talents when we've only been given the ability to hold one. But it's what do we do with that one? Because the stewardship principle is the same across 1, 3, and 5. It's the same stewardship principle. It's just a different amount we're stewarding. So you stewarded that beginning really well. So God saw that and said, look, you're faithful with what I've given you, and it's small. Let me give you more, because what you've learned when you were doing it hard and tough is going to be able to carry you. And you were talking about setting up some guardrails, which we'll get into. But I'd love for you to talk to maybe some church business leaders, and maybe even people who want to connect and raise up the next generation. I'd love you to talk into that, because I think that's something that you've done really well. Connect with the Gen Z, millennials, who generally research shows are the ones who are engaging online most, but also the ones who want to make the most change. That's what I've heard. Gen Z's the up and coming generation who want to make a change in the social space, and they're probably the most open spiritually as well. So what would you say to someone who's asking, like, if I want to see a future, I need to invest in the future. How do I do that? Like if I'm a construction worker, how do I make space to sit and to hear and to invest into that next generation? If I'm a youth pastor, if I'm a associate pastor or senior pastor, where my youth groups are dying, how do I look and see what needs to be the next step?
I think one of the big pieces of this puzzle is having the humility to learn from those that you're trying to care for. And what I mean by that is, again, throwing back to that skate park example, is that I didn't come in and go, hey, I'm this trained pastor and you guys are the ones that I want to connect with, so this is how I'm going to do it. I sat on the floor and I got my jeans dirty and I said, hey, what was that trick called? And I learnt along the way. And in this ministry that we do now, we're about to host a big Fortnite tournament, right? Like a couple of $1,000 prize pool and, lots of people that are competing in it from around the world. But the setting up of that, I'm connecting with some people that I've never met before that are members of our community that are a part of that generation. And I'm saying, hey, how would you do this? And how would you do that? And they're just like, well, that's a terrible idea, Kiran, because that wouldn't work, because there are like 4 different ways that people can exploit that process. So if the registration form has that clause, then someone's going to do this. And I'm like, these kids know how to overwrite our system. And I'm like, that's brilliant, because I'm like, okay, so how would you do it? And they go, instead, you should set it up like this and put the scoring system like this. And that willingness to learn and do that, like for me, leaders are learners, and in order to be the best at what we do in terms of leading and serving, we need to be willing to hear the voices of other people, have the humility to go, hey, I'm not high and mighty, but instead God has made all of us. And so this person has things that they can speak into and that I can learn from to help me do that. But the other thing would be, coming back to that intentionality piece that I mentioned earlier, is that in each of these fields and whatever business or profession, you are going to be uniquely positioned in a way to understand that in a way that others can't. And what I mean by that is, for me, right, if I was to get someone else who's not a gamer, throw them into my role, they would be like, this is taxing, I don't know what I'm doing, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if I was to try and start a ministry or was working in a space that was, I don't know, connecting with surfers, I would be like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But because of that interest, if someone else is a surfer by default, or if they, you used a tradie or whatever, then they've got an understanding of things. They've got a certain skill set, a certain way that they work, a certain culture that they understand, certain shared experiences and commonalities with others in that space. And so tapping into that to go, okay, what is it in this context that works? And that's where Twitch came from me. Like, I didn't just randomly go, Twitch sounds fun. I went, okay, if gamers are the group, and I'm called to meet them where they are, where are they?
Yeah, it's good.
And, obviously I can't just send a friend request to every random in the world and try and get in a game together. That just would never work. But I realized that Twitch, like you said, has millions of gamers that gather every day on this platform. So because of the demographic I'm trying to connect with, if I can find out where they are and work within that, then we're on to something. So
that's good, man.
That's what I would recommend, in taking a step back to assess and go, without just diving in, go, what am I diving into and where are they gathering and how does that work?
And that's such a good discipleship framework, because again, we're talking about Jesus meeting people where they are. Often we think discipleship starts once someone is a Christian and someone's like, puts their hand up at the altar call and makes a decision, and we've relegated our responsibility as Christians to a program where it's like, okay, now you're a Christian. Here's a, New Christian's Bible. Here's the life group you're going to go to. Here's a 6-week discipleship program. And once you reach that, good luck, go back into the world and make more disciples. And you're like, man, I'm so surprised that people have either left the church or aren't coming to church because we maybe have missed discipleship at its core fundamental point, which is meeting people where they are. And I love speaking to even people in our team about how we can build people regardless of if they're believers or not. Because I ask the question, I wonder if, you've got your disciples, even like Thomas, who doubted Jesus until he came to him with scars on his hand. I wonder if he actually believed in Jesus, even though he was being discipled for 3.5 years. And I asked the question of our team, I'm like, how many people are in our world who don't know Jesus yet, but who we can help them take one step closer? Every interaction we have with someone is going to help them take one step closer to Jesus or one step further. So meeting someone where they're at on an online kind of platform, do you think, and this is probably a huge question, but is this something that we can do? It's a question that's asked by church leaders since COVID, will continue to be asked because online church is not going anywhere. But can we disciple people effectively online?
Absolutely we can. And exactly what you just said, that journey doesn't just start from okay, you're a Christian now. There are some people in our community, to use an example without drawing any names in here, there are some people in our community that have been joining us in this space for literal years, like 2+ years of them being in every stream and them hanging out and them doing all that and never really interacting much with the Real Talk segment, which is our sermon segment, not really responding in that regard. They're present though. They're in the room and they've been in the room for so long. And then eventually I will receive a message, and this has happened numerous times, but I've received a message from someone being like, hey, so I've been here for the last 2 years. I'm an atheist. But now, after these 2 years of journeying together, I just want to say how much this particular Real Talk helped me. Wow. And I just want to say that, I got a message just last week from someone saying, I've always called myself an atheist, but I'm now the closest I've ever been to believing in God, and that's thanks to what you guys do. So good, and I'm like, I've never even met this person before. I've never been in the same room. So if you go, but you have to meet over a coffee and you have to have a Bible out in front of you, it's just like, according to this case study, I don't know if that's the case. You know what I mean? Right. Because here is someone who did it in their way. And I think that's really important to identify that. Everyone is different, and there are some people that physically cannot come to your church, or my church, or any church, because of like just geographical issues, because of social anxiety, and literally leaving the house is traumatic for them, like all kinds of things. And are we called to go, well, in that case, they can't get the full experience of Jesus? Sure. Absolutely not. Sure. We are called to go, we need to figure that out because they need it. And if they can't leave the house, we need to bring it to them. And so,
and it comes back to your obedience, your step of obedience, because it takes the responsibility off us when we realize that it's not our job to save people, and we can't. You know, as many coffees as you want to have, as many, you know, times you open the Bible with someone, until the Holy Spirit convicts them and draws them closer to the Father, there's nothing we can do. And the amazing thing about your presence online is that the Holy Spirit's not limited to a physical, you know, setting or an environment. Right. And sometimes we've tried to create a place for people to get saved, like the building or a service, like an hour service, expecting that 1 hour in someone's week is going to help them see Jesus more than the other hours. But what you're saying is, you know, being consistent, being present, being intentional, having these conversations, asking these questions, and allowing someone to create space in their life as opposed to come to a space is the best, like the thing that we need to do really moving forward.
This ministry operates 7 days a week because people operate 7 days a week. Right. And it's like, if people are journeying in life, then we want to be journeying with them through everything. Sure. So for example, this morning, before I drove here, we did a live stream, which was our Friday Morning Unfiltered is the name of the segment. Yep. No gameplay, no fancy lights, doesn't look nearly as good as this. And it was literally me on my phone, lying down, blanket up to my chin, pillows all around me, just talking to people and being like, guys, I'm so tired. It was at 7:30 in the morning. So I'm like, I'm so tired. And all it was for an hour was just chatting. That's it. That's all we did. We just said, hey, how's everyone doing? And we had people tuning in from Canada, and people tuning in from Sydney, and people tuning in from Thailand, and people were just showing up and being like, hey, this is what's going on in my life right now. Hey, could you be praying for this? Hey, and just different things coming up, and we get to journey with that. But it's like, it's not just here's the one interaction for the week. It's okay. And the reason why we started that segment is because I didn't have time on Fridays to do any sort of other stream. Right. So it was like, I've got an hour that I can squeeze in at 7:30 in the morning, and that's pretty much it. So let's make that happen. And we did. And now it's one of those segments that a lot of people that come to it love, because they know that they can just get that daily check-in and go, hey, how's everyone doing? What's going on in your world? What's going on in your country? You know, all of that, but in a way that isn't just surface level, but in a way that goes, this on its own as a one-off is, you know, has limited value, but as a part of that relationship and discipleship journey across a number of years is something that we've seen incredible fruit from people that go, this is a live stream unlike others, because they want to show up, because they know that they'll be noticed, and they know that they'll be loved, and they'll be cared for. And we've got an amazing team of volunteers that make all of this possible. Sure. And it's exactly that.
And it's that vulnerability when someone sees you in your bed, you know, like outside your normal environment of being, you know, professional Twitch streamer. They go, this guy's actually a normal person. You know, and how many times do people place a lens over Christians? Like if we put ourselves in our friends who don't know Jesus' shoes, how many times do they just see us as that Christian who's always on, always wanting to save me, always wanting to, you know, and not someone who's just the same and is, you know, was just as dead until they met Jesus and revisits those times and sits with someone and is like, hey, I understand what you're going through, but here's hope.
That, what you just said, absolutely nailed it, in the sense that one thing that I love about the live streaming space and what we do is the authenticity, because there are no outtakes. It's not like a YouTube video where you crop out the bad bits and keep the best. Instead, here is one where if I need to burp, it's going to happen. And I'm just going to have to go, sorry about that, guys, and move on. And if something goes wrong in the middle of the stream, it's going to happen. But the thing that I love about that is that some people, depending on their church and their culture and their country, will be like, pastors are some like next to God level kind of thing. But I get to counter that by going, hey, here's me, flaws and all. So let's journey together. And so there'll be some times where I just will be like, guys, I don't have a lot of energy today.
Yeah.
Like I'm just pretty zapped. So can we just chill and we'll just put on some lo-fi music and we'll just vibe.
Yeah.
Whereas there'll be other times where I'm just like, hey, I'm ready to go. Let's host a tournament. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they get it as it is. And that's why today, the one where I was blanket up to my chin, I've never done that before.
Yeah.
That's not a regular thing. Sometimes Friday morning unfiltered is me out in the backyard walking around the garden. Sometimes it's me at a coffee shop and doing it from just various locations, showing the real part of life.
Yeah.
But this morning I was tired.
Yeah.
And so part of me went, oh, there's entertainer performer mode that you could flick on and turn everything on and go, okay, cool, here we are. This is, let's do that. But I was like, actually, I think what's more beneficial for the authenticity factor of this is what a Christian life looks like. It looks a lot like your life.
Yeah.
We get tired, you get tired, all of that. So instead I went, let's just do this. And I didn't do it from bed because I'm married and my wife was also in bed and that would have been not appropriate or helpful. Sure. So I moved out to the couch, brought my blanket and pillow with me, and then went live from the couch. And I said that because again, the care and the boundary stuff is important. But definitely just doing that. So yeah.
So good, man. Talk to me about boundaries. So this would be really hard.
Yeah.
Like, so being a guy, being, a Christian, even just being, a human, the online space, I'm scared for my children, my future children who will grow up in a space where they've got the world in their pocket and they can access anything they want unless we set boundaries, right? How have you set boundaries in your ministry, especially in the online space where it's so easy to just get lost, go down whether it's spending hours on YouTube, learning about killer whales, which, look, I'm not going to lie, I've done before. Or
that was very specific.
Yeah, I'm speaking from experience.
Killer whales. I'm like,
if you can ask me offline how killer whales hunt, because I can tell you.
Okay.
But on the dark side, there's also you got pornography, you've got lots of stuff happening that you can access straight away. How have you set personal boundaries, accountability, but also ministry? You've said you've got a lot of accountability in ministry.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that really quickly as we come to a close? Because I think, again, if there are listeners here who are, and I'm sure there are, inspired by what you've done and want to step into this space, how do they set themselves up the best for longevity in this space?
Totally. I'll be honest with you. This is a hard question to answer quickly just because it's so important. Because boundaries are so important because it's the scaffolding, it's the foundations of what you do. Because if you don't care for yourself and the ministry, you're going to have the best of intentions and you're going to hurt someone. And that's not okay. Sure. And so instead, we do a variety of things. Part of our ministry core is being an alternative where like you said, there's so much unhelpful content in the online spaces. We want to go, how do we create a space that's similar enough to what people are knowing and expecting, but in a way that is wholesome and that they're not going to get sexual references and drug references and swearing and all the different bits and pieces that they might see in other Twitch streams or YouTube channels or whatever. But here we'll still provide that, the gameplay that you expect and all of that, but in a way that is clean and family friendly and does that. So there's that. Another one in terms of the boundary pieces is verbally talking about times and stuff like that, where people, just yesterday, someone was like, hey, Kiran, can you stream on weekends? Because then I could watch, because I can't really watch on weekdays. And I said, no, I can't. And the reason why is because I have a wife that I need to be with. And if I stream on a weekend, then I don't get to see my wife. And so I need to put that boundary in. But by me saying that, I'm showing other people that they too need to go, well, what are the relationships I need to invest in and how to do that? In the sense of the ministry side of things, I think the biggest factor, especially from the non-Christian external point of view, is the money factor. Is the social media space can be very lucrative when channels start to grow and that kind of thing. You see YouTubers driving, fancy cars and massive mansions. What I wanted was this to be a ministry from the get-go and for that to never get confused. And so what we've actually done is we've gone the flip side and we've registered as a not-for-profit. And any bit of revenue from anything that I do, from the ad revenue on any of the YouTube videos or Twitch subscriptions or you name it, not a cent of that goes into my account. My personal bank accounts aren't even linked to anything. Instead, it all goes to the not-for-profit's ministry account, of which I'm not even a signatory on that account because I wanted to just keep myself separated from that. And we have a board of pastors and leaders that oversee this, and a few of them are signatories on that. And the whole point of that was that one day, if some news report comes out saying, oh, no wonder this guy wants to do online ministry. Look at the $1 million he made this week.
Yeah.
Instead, I can say, actually, the ministry might have made $1 million this week, but I didn't. My pay didn't go up by a cent.
Great.
Instead, we were able to fund this person, and we were able to help this person, and we were able to get that person out of debt, and we were able to, do all these things, because in the same way as a church, when you tithe to a church, you're hoping that's not going into the senior pastor's pocket. It's going to the ministry of the church. And so that's the same way that I've set this up. And I did that preemptively because this ministry wasn't making a cent. And so you could argue, well, hold on, if it's not making any money, shouldn't it come to you, at least the little bits that do come through? But it was that intentionality and the forethought of going, I see this as one day being something huge that can bless so many people, and I don't want anyone ever questioning my motives.
Great.
So therefore I'm going to do that. And true to form, I had an interview with the ABC, and one of the questions that they asked was, so where does the money go? Wow. And when I was able to tell them, they were like, that's awesome. And when they put the article out that they did, top to bottom of this article was 100% positive and affirming. That's and it was them being like, they're not a Christian media outlet, but they're going, hey, what Pastor Scar's doing is great and people should check it out. And I was like, wow, because of that intentionality and those boundaries put in, it means that any temptation is removed, and it's just set up in a way that is going to be set up for the long term, and where no one person is benefited, but the collective is absolutely blessed through that. And that's where we're at in that journey.
So good, man. So good. I think in that is such a telling part of who you are, but also a great principle for Christians in the workplace, because integrity and character is something that we need to build in the shadows and comes out in the light if it is ever placed under the microscope. So I love that, man. And as we end, we normally do a quick fire round. We'll just ask you a couple of questions.
Love it.
Don't give you enough time to think. So hopefully it's just, reaction.
I'm a live streamer. All I do is react, bro. Like, it's good.
This is great, man. But I'm going to ask you 3 questions and just, let me know what your thoughts are. The first one is, what does the Sabbath look like to you?
Yeah, so for me, that obviously is rest. And so the weekends, like I said, I intentionally don't stream on a weekend. And that is something that we do. But Sarah and I also love to get away as much as we can. Great. So we'll book an Airbnb and just go, including next weekend where we're doing that.
Let's go. Nice, man. What's the most impactful resource that's helped you in this ministry or your business?
I this year have been doing a course called the Arrow Leadership course, and it's a program that has a pastoral component, but then there's a separate one called Executive Leaders and Not-for-Profits. I now run a not-for-profit, so I signed up to that. It has been incredible.
Great.
So yeah,
great, and we'll link to that in the bio or somewhere. And last question: the best piece of advice that you were given out when starting your business or ministry?
I don't know if this was one necessary sentence that someone said or if this was more of a general sentiment, but I mentioned it earlier. Leaders are learners. And I think the best thing that I've done this year for not just myself, but also for the ministry is invest in myself, invest in my own development process and doing that. By investing in myself, I'm a better version of me that is less likely to burn out or destroy the ministry or any of those things that we never want to do, but sometimes inevitably happen. Leaders are learners. So being willing to continue to learn and from a variety of voices and to really do that in a holistic way.
So good, man. Thanks so much for being a part of this. This is going to bless so many people without a doubt. And we are continuing to pray for your ministry. I can't wait to see how this just blows up. And bro, this 3 billion people.
Yes.
Oh man, it's a
massive mission field, man. It's crazy.
If you're listening to this or watching this and you want to help or support Kiran, where can they find you? Where can they access?
So we're on all social media platforms. So if you just type in Pastor Scar, like PastorSkar, Pastor Scar will come up. But the other key way, because it can send you to everything else, is www.pastorscar.com. And there's a donate link there if people want to support the ministry financially. There are links to the ABC article and others, maybe even this once it goes up. So it'll all be linked there.
Easy. Thanks for your time, man.
Cool. Thanks, mate.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you did enjoy it, why don't you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. You can also join our online community via Facebook or Instagram. And better yet, why don't you send this to someone who you think it may help in helping them take their next step towards becoming
and being the change in their church and in their world. Because don't forget, we are the kings and priests of our world.